I see livestock as a technology developed by humanity for survival, and I don't want to like throw out the baby with the bathwater. You know, like this is something that we're going to need in the future anyways, and all these heritage breeds, the diversity can be lost, and they're being lost as, you know, cultures modernize around the world. So it's really important, I think, that we preserve these heritage breeds, and the only way to do that is to get farmers farming them and, and getting a market for the products that they produce.
It extends to beyond just heritage breeds. Within every breed, there is almost as much genetic variance between individuals as there are between some individuals from entirely different breeds. And I recently read an FAO study that talked about the number of livestock breeds that are lost every year, and it can be upwards of 5 or 6 a month. We're not talking, you know, no, commercial cattle didn't just disappear, but that's the problem. Commercial cattle account for 85% or more of the world's cattle now. Whereas 50 years ago, there were 25 or 30 breeds that you could find within a 2 or 3 county radius of anywhere you were raising cattle.
Right, and they're adapted to the conditions in that area. Whereas like everybody's raising Holsteins around here, and you know, I've heard that all of the Holsteins descend from like one bull from like the 1950s.
It's not much off that, right? And the Holstein is technically the Holstein Friesian. It's a single dairy breed developed in one location in the UK, imported to the United States and propagated from there. That is a horrible way to get into genetic bottlenecking. The diversity that exists within any specific plant species or plant variety or even named cultivar of a specific variety has to be maintained if we're going to have a broad enough genetic base to take care of changing environment, changing climate, changing socio-political decision making. Something as small as the government changing a subsidy program can dramatically change what farmers do within a 2 or 3 year period. And if for some reason we were to move away from subsidizing corn or cotton, we could lose a portion of our currently bottlenecked genetic base in one of those 2 plant species. Perhaps if it's a genetically modified organism, we could stand to lose some of that plant-based genetics, but that doesn't negate the fact that to get to where we are now, we've already lost a huge amount of our biodiversity.
So what kind of inputs do you have right now, and sort of are you working towards a closed loop system so that you don't have to bring as many inputs from outside your farm?
We are. That is one of our most stringent goals here on the farm, is to reduce the off-farm inputs to the maximum extent possible. In that vein, we are working to take all of our ruminant species, the cattle, the sheep, and the goats, completely off grain, and in fact are successful on that. Over the last 3 years, we've taken the livestock species that I just mentioned, the ruminants, and removed grain from their diet and transitioned them to a forage and pasture-based system only. And in fact, this last year, we managed to keep our 5 cows, 18 sheep that then had lambs this spring, and now we're up to 24, and our 8 goats through the entire winter grazing, and only had to supplement approximately 2.5 tons of hay, which for the average farmer around here, most of them utilize between 1 and 2 tons of hay per animal unit to get through the winter.
So I mean, you're saying that you can get more productivity off a smaller piece of land than conventional agriculture. What is the difference there? Do you think that the land is just more productive when it's sustainably grazed?
I do. I feel that the land is, as far as measuring land productivity for pasture-based systems, that's measured in dry matter production per acre per year. And from the time that we moved here till now, we have almost doubled our forage production on our existing land base. So that's what's enabled us to continue to graze later and later into the year, and to start grazing earlier and earlier in the year and minimize the amount of time that we feed hay. And currently we're bringing in all of the hay that we feed for the sole reason that that's also a fertility import. So it brings organic matter to the farm, it brings phosphorus, and it brings some small amounts of nitrogen, it brings potassium to the farm.
So what kind of products are you producing from the livestock here?
The livestock we are predominantly selling as meat. For our own use, we do milk the dairy goats, and we have periodically milked the cattle. For legal reasons, we do not sell any of our milk or cheese products at retail. We will do some barter and exchange. That gets into the regulation by the federal government of individual food choices. So because we don't want to go to the expense to license as a grade A dairy, we keep the dairy products predominantly for ourselves. But we have processed beef from our own animals. We do sell lamb. We also do sell eggs from our laying flock, which we utilize to go around the pastures and scratch the manure.
And are you able to sell that pretty much in the area, like a Dancing Rabbit and Red Earth Farms, or do you go outside?
Currently, we've been able to sell all of our meat product directly within the tri-communities, the quad communities to include Rutledge there. Our bottleneck has not been production capacity, and we've never reached the point where we couldn't sell what we produce. The bottleneck has been processing. To sell legally at retail, you have to either be state or USDA inspected, and because we're raising a very unique product, animals raised in a sustainable, ethical manner, we also want our animals to be slaughtered and processed in a sustainable and ethical manner. And our closest source of processing will not guarantee that we are getting back the meat from the animals that we're providing them. So we have to travel a significant distance to find a producer who we feel slaughters ethically, and we feel comfortable and confident in that we're going to get back the material from the animals that we actually take in. In addition to what we feel is important to be able to sell to our local market, we've also been able to meet most of our family's needs from our own farm. So particular to meat, both beef, lamb, and pork, over the last several years, we've only had to purchase approximately 15 to 30 pounds of meat from commercial sources. And those are things that we couldn't or chose not to produce on farm. In addition, last year with our dairy goats, we were milking 4 at the time, we were able to meet all of our family's needs for cheese and fluid milk from our own farm for a 9-month period. The one thing that we were not able to produce from the dairy goats was butter. The yield is so low that we chose not to do that. Now, in addition to being able to meet our own needs, the whey from our cheese making from our goats goes directly to our pigs to offset some of the nutritional deficiencies that they would have if they were just had access to the forage and hay production material that we provide to them.
Well, that was a really interesting talk with Jack and tour of his farm and how he's using livestock to restore degraded farmland. And now here at Dancing Rabbit, we're sort of in the same situation. We have degraded farmland and we have a lot of work to do to restore it, to bring it back into production so that we can grow our food. And I think that livestock have been and are going to be key in doing that into the future. And I'd like to do a video about the critters here, they're a group of people here that are raising livestock. And I've also used livestock in my vineyard here to restore the land, starting out with adding humanure, which is something that we've produced here in some abundance. And then also I've added, cow manure, composted cow manure from local dairy farms. Over the years, I've also run chicken tractors through here with laying hens to add some fertility and also deal with some of the bug problems. And then I've also run sheep through here in the past. So I had some Southdown baby doll sheep, and not only did they add fertility and cycle nutrients in that way, they were mowing to take the place of tractor mowing. So it reduced my use of fossil fuel. Now, I know there are people out there who are against animal husbandry and the raising of livestock because of animal rights reasons. They feel like the animals are suffering, and I think that's definitely a valid concern and a valid reason not to raise livestock industrially. But often animal rights activists are against any kind of livestock production. Peter Singer, a longtime animal rights activist and who some would call the father of the modern animal rights movement, has said that our raising of livestock is not for survival, that we're doing it just to provide the luxury of being able to eat certain kinds of meat or certain kinds of food. And I think that that's true to a large degree in rich countries in the world, that we're eating too much meat and it is a luxury, and it's on a scale and a level of cruelty that is way beyond what it needs to be and what is sustainable. However, I think that the majority of humans are raising enough meat to survive. They are raising livestock at a survival level. We're just not doing it here in the richer countries that are consuming most of the world's resources. In the past, human cultures needed livestock to survive. It helped them to survive in areas where they wouldn't have been able to survive. But I think throughout history, there's very few examples of humans raising crops without the use of animals in some way, either to cycle nutrients and add fertility, or to actually do a lot of the work that's involved in growing the crop. Animals were used and grazed in areas to add, to either move fertility from areas where crops were not grown, like pasture land, permanent pasture land. They would be moved into fields where they were going to plant their grains or the vegetables or whatever, and then they would drop their manure there and fertilize the area. So it's pretty key in order to grow vegetables and grains to have animals be a part of that system. What we've replaced animals with in our economy and in our agriculture largely is fossil fuel. So we have fossil fuel run tractors to do the work that animals used to do in tilling up land. Most of the nitrogen that's provided on industrial farms these days comes from fossil fuel directly. It comes from the processing of natural gas into a form that can be used by plants. And I think that in the future, we are going to need those livestock again. Having this abundance of fossil fuel has made it possible for us to have the luxury of thinking about a vegan diet. But I think that in a post-fossil fuel world, we're going to need animals for working the soil, for tilling the land in order to produce vegetables and other grains on a larger scale like we had in the past before fossil fuel. We're not going to have the tractors, but we're also going to need them to cycle nutrients because we won't have the fossil fuel that we currently use to add nitrogen to the soil and to power our mining of other macronutrients that are needed by plants, such as phosphorus and potassium. Our human ancestors spent thousands of years creating these breeds of livestock to be of benefit to humanity. And if we just sort of let those livestock go extinct by not raising them, we're basically just undoing all of their hard work and the work that was put into this vital technology for humanity's survival. All right, well, I just wanted to thank Aaron Murphy and Ray Machado for their help on this video. They did the camera work and the sound and also contributed their equipment. Hopefully I can work with them again in the future and we can do some kind of exchange because they do a lot of video production here as well. Well, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and share and like this video, and I'll see you next time. You need a large stand in order to get the pollen to fall out of the tassels and land on the silks. And one way to ensure that if the wind's not blowing the right direction, you're still going to get plenty of pollen on your silks is to do it by hand. Corn is one of those plants that can have sort of the effects of the genetics in the kernel itself. So if it's cross-pollinated with some other variety, the kernel that's formed from that pollination will have the attributes of both the parent plants. So it kind of can be a problem if you have